经理，你先把我看录制的权限开。
已经开了。
好，可以。
先测试一下我的声音可以吗？
可以。
好的。Hi, Martin. Good. Would you please unmute yourself?
Can you hear me?
Okay, yes. We just test your sound and your picture. It's good.
Very good, Captain. Thank you so much.
Okay. You can take a rest.
Yes. I'll just close the video and take a break. Thank you.
Thank you. Good afternoon, Dr. Shafia. Can I test your sound?武官，您说两句，声音没问题吧？
田总怎么样？能听见吗？
可以。
好的。
好，严博士好。
袁老师、田总好，上线了，上线了。
Anna, good afternoon.
Hi, good afternoon.
Hi.
Hello, hi, good afternoon, everyone.
Hi, good afternoon, Dr. Shafia.
Hi, nice to meet you.
Hi, Fifi, long time
Hey,
no
Anyan,
see.
long time no see. How are you?
Great, great. How about you?
Not too bad, it's fine.
You didn't change at all.
Neither did you.
All the familiar faces that we know.
Hi.
Hello,
Let's come
Martin.
together.
Hi,
Hello,
Captain.
Fifi. Hi,
Hey.
Yan Yan. Hello, Anna.
Hello, good afternoon.
Good afternoon to you all. Who is behind 1 hour? I think Fifi is 1 hour behind, right?
Yes, yes. It's gonna be 1 o'clock here.
Yeah. So I think China, Philippines.
Dr. Nunam Tuong, if
Hi,
I
hello.
pronounce correct.
Yeah,
Hi,
hello. Yeah,
nice to meet you.
Hi. Yeah,
Hi.
nice to meet you.
Hello,
give me-
Yan.
Hi, Yan Yan.
Hi, long time no see.
Yeah. Give me a
Oh.
few minutes. I need some makeup.
You don't need at all. Happy to
Oh,
see
good.
old friends.
Yeah, but how is the weather in Hainan now?
Oh, it's very hot, but but we don't feel too much of the hot wave because we pretty much stay indoor. You know, in the office, it's always we always have this air conditioning.
I'm not in Beijing right now. I'm now working in the home of my father-in-law. It is in Shanxi province in Hanzhong. I think weather here is quite good. We don't have to open the air conditioner. And also there are many beautiful mountains and rivers. So if not for pandemic, I do want to plan the meeting in Hanzhong so that we can meet in person in such a beautiful place.
Oh, I think that's great. I've never been there. And I also heard that Beijing is now even hotter than Hainan.
Yeah.
How long will you stay in Shanxi?
I'm not sure. I think I'm gonna to wait until the summer vacation so that the kids, both my daughter and kids from my brother, they will all come here, and I will open a kindergarten to look after them, and then until the opening of the autumn season.
Oh, that's very nice.
Martin, now you are in Kuala Lumpur?
Yes.
Good.
I got the 2 hours there to witness that I'm still in Kuala Lumpur. Although it is, screensaver.
I remember once I was, I think exactly at the same time, about in July or August, I was in Langkawi. I stayed there for 1 week.
Wow, I'm so jealous of you. I don't get that opportunity. 1 week.
Yeah, it's a long meeting. I think it's also about the maritime security affairs.
Okay. So how many times did you all go to the beach in that 1 week? And how many times the actual meeting?
I think the hotel is just beside the beaches. And there are lots of spa shops there.
Wonderful, wonderful. I'm sure there's a lot to discuss when you're in the spa.
And there are many seafoods there. It's very cheap.
True. Langkawi has got beautiful beaches. Some of the best beaches in Malaysia are Langkawi. It's white in color. Yeah, a lot of people choose Langkawi. Dr. Zhao, how are you? You're muted.
Hello, good afternoon.
Good afternoon to you.
Everyone is
So it's summer now in China, right?
Yes, see, summer vacation just begins, so the children
Okay.
are all at home. So for
Okay.
this conference, I'm hoping next week I can take my two children to go, to go for some holiday.
Exactly. I think now is the best time to have all the meetings before the stampede starts next week,
Oh, I miss Southeast Asia. I hope next year we can meet each other. We can, yes, travel, as normal as the good olden days.
I don't know, because down here we are seeing some spikes in COVID already, again, Singapore, Malaysia, but not as serious, but it's not like, oh, you got COVID. And now it's like, oh, you got COVID.
It's already the post-COVID era. Yes. I read the news that,
I'm sorry. Yeah.
there you go.
Yeah, I just feel it's very hard to go back normal, right?
Yeah.
So
yeah.
so
I
the
mean,
new normal, yeah. For me.
I mean, I went to Eastern Europe 2 months ago in the Balkans. I was the only one wearing a mask. It felt so
So you feel
strange.
you are special,
Yeah.
like
Yeah. I was in Zagreb and I was the only one wearing mask, and I was like, okay, So it seems like everything's okay there, that side, the Eastern Europe, Zagreb, Croatia, Macedonia and all that. Only when I came to Turkey in Istanbul, people started wearing masks. Otherwise,
okay.
I don't know. I don't see a spike in COVID admissions. Must be the food they're eating and the water they're drinking, I don't know.
So how about in Indonesia? The people still wear mask or not?
In Indonesia, yes, we do. We still have masks on. But last month, I think the regulations was reduced to wearing the mask outside, so outdoors.
Wow.
But since yesterday, I think because of the spike of the cases, we now have to wear mask again outdoors. So both outdoors and indoors. Yeah.
Yeah.
There is a relaxation on outdoors still in Malaysia. Relaxation outdoors, and but still you have to take your own precautions. I myself got COVID twice. I got it last year in February.
Good afternoon, Professor Aki. Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you. Thank you for inviting
Professor
me.
Aki,
Hello.
how are
Hi,
you?
Aki.
Hi. Fifi.
Yes.
No see you.
I didn't recognize your new last name. That's why I didn't know it was you.
This is my married name, Sakab. Now I have two little boys.
Oh, wow.
5 years old and one year old. I'm very busy.
I can imagine. It's good to see you again.
Yeah, thank you very much. Good to see you again too.
Good to see
Hello,
you.
Rocket. I think we are only missing you. So we will kick off on time and wait you online.
Yeah.
So I think we are almost on time. We are still missing one guest speaker. We'll just kick off and wait him online. Distinguished speakers, military attaches, participants, and auditors, good afternoon and good evening. On behalf of the Global Governance Institution, a very warm welcome to you all. For distinguished speakers, our sincere thanks to you for taking time to join the GGI webinar on security implications of the Indo-Pacific Partnership for Maritime Domain Awareness and the Big Power Competition, where we have listed some framing questions for our panelists. As a non-government independent think tank, the GGI has conducted a series of international dialogues for scholars worldwide to share their perspectives. The big picture for this webinar is that the pandemic concurrent with the Russia-Ukraine conflict have brought tremendous uncertainty and hardship for average people in Asia-Pacific regions. However, there are signs in a just ended NATO summits that show a trend of expanding the NATO strategy to cover and link with the Indo-Pacific, which means that the security dilemma and uncertainty in the NATO-covered area may also spill into the Asia-Pacific region. The Asia-Pacific has already witnessed major tragic wars since the Second World War, such as the Korean War, the Vietnam War, the Afghanistan War, which brought huge loss of civilian lives and casualties. And unfortunately, all three wars were fought by the United States. Still, the Asia-Pacific region experienced rapid growth with emerging markets and economy, becoming one of the most dynamic, vibrant, and prosperous regions in the world. The Asia-Pacific people benefit from peace and stability. The Asia-Pacific people cherish peace and stability. And more than ever, the Asia-Pacific people call upon peace and stability. Another background is the big power competition. Although this competition is imposed upon China, and China does not ask for it, it indeed is shaping all aspects of international relations. We have seen a great America that led the Allies to victory in the Second World War and brought prosperity to American people through innovation and competition. But what we see now is an America that does not compete with other countries through developing itself and via fair competition, but by containing and coercing through all of government approach and countless unilateral sanctions. In fact, the US is building layers of layered circles, blocks, and allies with a variety of identities to just contain China. It is against this background and at this juncture, the US-led Quad put forward the Indo-Pacific Partnership for Maritime Domain Awareness. What is its real purpose and intentions in terms of security implications? Will it duplicate or complement the current maritime information sharing initiatives? Is it just another tool of big power competition? Since it is commercially run, who will bear the cost? To answer those questions and concerns, today we invited a group of great scholars to share their perspectives. As always, the audiences of the GGI webinar expect more perspective than only information from our panelists. We invite one GGI speaker, Dr. Zhou, as the first speaker to give a background presentation to lay out the ground. So we look forward to our panelists to share more opinions and perspectives. Only so can we manage well the time and have more engagements. Without further delay, let me turn over the floor back to Senior Colonel Wang, the Vice President of GGI, and as well, the Director of Center for American Studies at GGI. He will moderate the whole session, the last sessions. Okay. Senior Colonel Wang, the floor is yours. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, President Captain Tian. Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. I'm Senior Colonel Wang, retired. Before my retirement, I served as Defense Attaché of China to the Philippines and the Czech Republic. I'm now a research fellow with the Global Governance Institution. I'm deeply honored today to moderate this panel discussion of the Indo-Pacific Partnership for Maritime Domain Awareness. Over a month ago, Quad unveiled the IPMDA, among other efforts at Tokyo Summit, which promptly attracted wide international attention. Many comments saw this initiative as a substantive development and the tangible security and achievement of Quad since its inception in 2007. Some say by addressing the IUU fishing, illegal, unreported, and unregulated fishing, gray zone, tactical activities, etc., IPMDA will show its big value to deliver public goods to the region, thus contributing to the peace, stability, and prosperity. Others say, obviously, the initiative has specific target, trying to embarrass and restrain China. Some emphasize the civilian nature of the initiative. Others argue it could lead to militarization of the region if Quad used the initiative to monitor and track Chinese naval activities. So we hope today's gathering could help our audience to have better knowledge about IPMDA. For today's discussion, we draw experts in this field across the world who will contribute valuable insights to this important and interesting topic. Our discussion will be divided into two parts. First is panelist presentation, each with roughly 8 minutes, followed with moderated discussions, where panelists may either comment on others' keynote speech or add some new points to enrich your previous presentation. The second session is the question and answer, depending on how much time we have. We will have questions coming from online observers. Now, let's kick off the discussion. As mentioned by Captain Tian, the first speaker is Dr. Zhou. She is Deputy Director of the Center for Southeast Studies of the Global Governance Institution, GGI. Dr. Zhou, it's your floor. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Andy and Shen Yun Lao Shi. It's a pure honor for me to be here today to share the idea with all the great scholars from the whole world. I think as Shen Yun Lao Shi and Andy said in the beginning, I think for IPMDA, the Indo-Pacific Maritime Domain Awareness, we can take it as a key progress for the institutional construction for the Quad. I think geographically, it's linked to ocean and it's covered the full range of the Indo-Pacific area. And from functionally, I think the information and the intelligence cooperation network will build a base for the future, deeper or further cooperation for the Quad. And so far we can see the 4 Quad countries really showing their strong motivation behind this initiative. So let's see, for Biden, I think for the Biden government, for the recent years, we can see the US, no matter its think tank, its Navy, or some politicians, they really invested a lot of resource to exaggerate so-called Chinese military militia and the Chinese green zone strategy. I think on the, I think this IPMDA, we can take it like as a part of the answer to address those so-called Chinese maritime issue from the US side. I think under the new US integrated deterrence strategy, I think this IPMDA is showing like they are very focused on the alliance coordination, like to combine the military and the civil lines two together and the blurring the military and the non-military targets. So I think that's where even you can think they could probably would like to take this as a showcase of the new strategy. And we can think also IPMDA, probably along with IPEF, even you can think with now the G7's PGII, belong to a part of the ground strategy of the Indo-Pacific. I think for the new Australia new government, this IPMDA also have the very significant strategy and even the symbolic meaning for the new Australia government. There was a two information fusion center located in the Pacific Island. That really could means like Australia have very strong relations with those Pacific Islands. I think that could send a very clear and a signal inside Australia and for the board to showing the new government have this showing their strength in this Pacific Island and the Australian fight back, so-called fight back for the Chinese presence in this area. I think for let's go talk for the Japan, the Kusida government. I think this is along also with Japan. Now we see they showing the willing to join the Five Eyes. I think if it's in this case, IPMDA also is a very important start to have the close information and the intelligence relationship in the North China Sea, in all South China Sea, and with US and Australia. I think that's also helped the Kishida government showing they are determined to double down the Japanese military building and the power. And for India, I think these are IPMDA also the first go beyond the Pacific, and they also quite focus on the Indian Ocean and address to Indians concerned about the Chinese, the present in the Indian Ocean. In the Indian Ocean, I think that's also very much matched with Indians' strategy concerns, and also can help Indian to show he's not always the weak part of the Quad, right? He also have this substance and input for the institutional construction. So that's so far we see we can see there was so much how to say the strategy and the geopolitics concern behind this initiative. So we also, as Andy and Xian Yun Lao mentioned in the beginning, actually IPMDA under the Quad is quite have very clear need. The target is China, and so far we can think it's quite exclusive, and even you can say it's quite a friendly if or so-called anti-China strong need background. So we do have a lot of concern about it, how it can bring the effect to the region. So the first, I think, we really concerned about how much pressure it could bring to the regional country, how much it could push regional country to even go further, face the dynamic of the great power conflicts. Then we know if IPMDA, as some US or Quad countries think tank to analyze, it will more focus beyond the fishing ship. It's more focused on Chinese Navy ship or coast guide ship. Then that will hugely increase the risk of the conflicts in the regions. And that will be the horrible, bring all the regional countries to a horrible situation. And I think that's directly threaten the peace and the stability of the region. And that's really pure blackmail for any country in this region. So that's where our deep concern. Then what we can do about it. So we would like to listen to other speakers about this biggest concern so far. The second, if we can be more positive to think about IPMDA, maybe if not too naive. So IPMDA is still more focused on just the common goods, like the safety of maritime navigation, or just against the illegal fishing. Then how efficient it could be in the end without China's participation? because we know China is the biggest player on those issues and in the region. So in the end of the day, how much really common goods it can bring to the region without a more open and inclusive mechanism to some kind of can work with China. So if we can further push this to some to the other questions, if it's possible, we can imagine in the future there was some approachment, like China can still work in some specific field with this initiative and with other regional countries. So we put in the end, we can really bring the real peace and the real some stability to the region. So that's also would like to discuss more with the speakers. And the third, we also worry about the IPMDA's relationship with other already exist the similar regional maritime mechanism. For example, like a RECAP, also located in Singapore. I think it's a much more local and more non-military, more the mechanism, institution like in the region, and how in the future how those institutions work together. It's really they will under the shadow of the IPMDA, or they can have some way to more to combine all the things together for more open and inclusive process. We don't know so far, and we also that's bring our deep concerns about if IPMDA will deeply erode the regional centrality or regional solidarity. I think that's also we will really worry about this. And there was also some issues, I think, above those strategy concern. We would like to, in the future, we would like to closely watch and follow. And we also would like to discuss with all the speakers in the panel. It's like we know the situation in the IPMDA in Quad. I think they have the 4 countries have a quite unequal and unbalanced military relation with each other, especially India. I think among the other 3 countries, India military relation with the other 3 is quite lag behind. So how IPMDA solve this problem, system name problem, and how he can push it for the bureaucratic building. So we really we really want to watch it, and also IPMDA plan to bring some more civilized technology company inside, work with the non-military sector. They also could bring some legitimacy challenge inside the country. So how the system is working, how those issues going on, I think it is quite detailed, but devil's always in the detail. So that's something I think in the future we can see. And the last but not least issue we would like to follow is the money, where the money come from, and how much US, Japan, Australia, even India would like to invest in this initiative. We know, especially in US, like there are so many plans and initiatives are going on, no matter in domestic, in Europe, or just in the Indo-Pacific. In the end of the day, how much US can focus on this specific initiative, and Australia and Japan seems like would like to work more on it. But so in the end, how much more they can put on it, and how far they could go in the future, I think we also is closely to watch. So that's basically that's all I've got to say. And my time I think is up anyways. So thank you for listening. And okay, I go back to Shen. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Jojo, for your informative presentation. Now our second speaker is Dr. Savaran Singh. So Dr. Singh, are you on the line?
It's not on the line. I think we can skip.
We can skip.
Professor
Okay.
Savaran.
Okay. Okay. Now we request Dr. Aki Sakapi Mori. She is currently an assistant professor of the Faculty of Humanities and Social Sciences at the University of Tsukuba. Now it's your time. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you for inviting me to provide the Japanese perspective. I shared my my PowerPoint slide, and oh my God. So today I would like to talk about the Japanese effort. I'm sorry. Just wait. Today I would like to talk about the Japanese effort on MDA issue, especially in international cooperation. My main argument is that Japan has been working with developing countries to increase their maritime domain awareness, especially through by providing support capacity building through Japanese Coast Guard. So also that IPMDA, I don't see, we haven't seen how this initiative will be implemented. We haven't seen yet. However, from Japanese perspective, I think based on the ongoing project provided by the Japanese Coast Guard, the Japanese Coast Guard will continue to play a big role in promoting IPMDA as well. So Japan has been working with developing countries on this issue, MDA, in international cooperation through several ways. The first of all, Professor and Dr. Jojo mentioned about RECAP. So RECAP ISC is this is the originally Japanese proposal in 2001 and come into force in 2006. And now we have 21 contracting parties, including China and all Quad members. So China and the Quad members are working with this framework, working together on MDA issued within this framework. And in Tokyo, Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Japan hold as an official event of the ARF, the second ARF workshop on international cooperation and on MDA in 2012. I'm sorry, 2 years before, or just before the beginning of the global pandemic. And China and all Quad members are participated to this workshop as well. And Japan has been working with, especially with Southeast Asian countries through bilateral cooperation on supporting capacity building for maritime safety and security. And as I said, Japanese Coast Guard play big role in this initiative. And Japanese Coast Guard, this is the map provided by the Japanese Coast Guard. I'm sorry, in Japanese only, but Japanese Coast Guard covers a wide range of region to promote capacity building for maritime safety and security. The fund is coming from technical cooperation project from Japan International Cooperation Agency, JICA, and Japanese private think tank, Nippon Foundation. And based on this initiative, Japan Coast Guard dispatching liaison specialist for long term to Palau, the Philippines, and Malaysia. And Japanese Coast Guard have supported the launch of Coast Guard in Indonesia and in Malaysia. And Japan has been working with these counterparts. And Japanese Coast Guard also dispatching a mobile cooperation team. The Japanese Coast Guard established this team in recent years to provide the support to provide the capacity building programs to Indo-Pacific nations and Southeast Asian countries and the Pacific Islands. It covers the region that Quad IPMDA in the Quad provides. It overlapped region. So that I guess Japan Coast Guard will continue to play a role in providing capacity building for maritime security and safety. This has a clear link to increase MDA in those countries. So these are the ongoing projects provided by Japanese Coast Guard. So I think from Japanese side, Japanese Coast Guard will the main player in promoting IPMDA. So of course, in coordination with Ministry of Foreign Affairs. And so partially, Japan Maritime Self-Defense Force will be providing some role in relation to the counter-piracy issues. But I think the Japan Coast Guard will play the major role in Japanese cooperation on the issue of IPMDA. So as I said, Japan has been working with the developing countries to elevate their MDA capabilities. And for Japan, IPMDA in the Quad is consistent with the ongoing Japanese effort in the issue of MDA. So the Quad is one of the tool or platform for Japan to achieve the free and open Indo-Pacific. So by ensuring rules-based international order. So MDA is clearly related to this initiative. So to ensure a rules-based international order. And I think Quad member countries deliberately frames Quad as a coalition providing public goods in the Pacific rather than anti-China groupings. Although Chinese colleague worried about this frame has background motivation, but I think from Japanese perspective, the Quad is one of the tools to achieve free and open in the Pacific. So that to frame anti-Japanese, anti-China groupings, to frame like this from Japanese perspective, it's not really capture the Japanese contribution to IPMDA. So in my thinking, so already because Japan already has been working with China on MDA issues through recap information sharing center and ARF workshop on MDA. And Japan and all other Quad member countries and China already participated to this cooperation. So we have link, we have cooperative platform on MDA issues. So that IPMDA, from Japanese perspective, this is the additional platform to achieve free and open Indo-Pacific with rule-based order. So it's not about anti-China grouping from the Japanese perspective. So the Japan can work with any nations who share the vision of free and open Indo-Pacific. So that working together for ensuring a rule-based order is this is the Japanese motivation to join IPMDA. This is my perspective. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Murray, for your presentation. You mentioned about Japan's support to the Indo-Pacific maritime security, in particular the IPMDA, and also you particularly respond to Dr. Jojo's worry about the anti-China element of the IPMDA. Thank you for your verification. Now our next speaker is Dr. No, is Professor Ana Rosario Malindag Uy. She is a Filipino professor of political science, international relations, development studies, and European studies. Now it's your time. Thank you.
Anna, please unmute yourself.
Yeah.
Okay, sorry. Oh, thank you very much, and good afternoon to all. To the globe, for me, I think I would be sharing more on what I think are the implications of the IPMDA and actually the reactions coming from the Philippines perspective and also from an ASEAN or a Southeast Asian perspective. So to the Global Governance Institute, the main organizer of this forum, with the theme security implications of the Indo-Pacific maritime domain, awareness under big power competition, I would like to express my sincere thanks for inviting me as one of the speakers. Distinguished speakers, military attaché, participants and friends and colleagues, a pleasant day to all. In an attempt to counter China and realize the aspiration of the United States pivot to Asia strategy, the US has rejuvenated the Quad. The Quad is part and parcel of the shift in US foreign policy from Middle East centered to Asia Pacific focus, from war on terror to greater power rivalry against China. All of these are embedded in the American pivot to Asia, or what is known as the US strategic rebalance to Asia under the Obama administration, that was renamed as the Indo-Pacific strategy under the Trump administration, which the Biden administration is now pursuing. The rebalance to Asia strategy is the US response to the ever-changing and very dynamic geopolitical context and environment of the Asia-Pacific region, which had been driven by significant developments such as the rise of the Asian economies, with China as the front runner, and the inevitable rise of China as a regional power in Asia and even beyond. The overarching narrative of the US rebalance to Asia strategy that is indeed driven by the compulsion of realpolitik in contemporary times, with China being identified as the #1 threat or challenge to the US hegemonic standing in Asia and in the world. In many ways, the strategy is not only fastened to the idea and the belief that the center of gravity for US foreign policy, national security, and economic interests is shifting towards Asia from the Middle East, but it is prefixed on the recognition that the Asia-Pacific would play an increasingly important role in driving the world's political and economic life in the 21st century. The US would like to take advantage of these opportunities to boast economic growth at home, to reassert its influence and leadership in the region, while trying to preserve its global hegemony. Hence, since the launch of its strategic rebalance to Asia strategy, the US has been looking for ways and means to boost its military security presence in the Asia Pacific. Indeed, this has been prompted a mix of reaction among countries in ASEAN and in Asia in general, with speculations that the military security component is the primary goal of the US rebalance to Asia's foreign policy. Just to note, the US rebalance to Asia strategy has three components: economic, diplomatic, and military security. Military security-wise, the US has been increasing its efforts to establish new and reinvigorate security alliances and cooperation with existing regional partners like the Philippines, Vietnam, Thailand, Malaysia, Indonesia, India, Japan, South Korea, Singapore, and even other countries in the Asia Pacific. Likewise, the conduct of freedom of navigation operations of US, like UK and Quad members, warships in the Indo-Pacific region is part and parcel of the US Grand Indo-Pacific strategy. Now, speaking of Quad, or the quadrilateral security dialogue, an informal strategic dialogue maintained by talks between member countries like the US, Japan, Australia, and India. For me, the way I see it, it is nothing more than a narrower security-centric effort of the US to counter China. Just last May 24 of this year, the Quad launched a new maritime domain awareness initiative coined as the Indo-Pacific Partnership for Maritime Domain Awareness, or IPMDA, designed accordingly to work with regional partners to respond to humanitarian and natural disasters, combat illegal, unregulated, and unreported fishing activities in the region. From the vantage point, I think, of the Quad, the IPMDA is projected as a vehicle or a mechanism to transform the ability of partners in the Pacific Islands, Southeast Asia, and the Indian Ocean region to monitor the waters on their shores fully, and in turn to uphold the so-called free and Indo-Pacific region. Nevertheless, all countries in the Asia-Pacific or Indo-Pacific region are somewhat invited except China. Although none of the leaders of the four member countries of Quad mentioned China during the unveiling of the IPMDA, it is evident that the said maritime surveillance initiative is to my impression, is to counter, contain, and check on China's maritime movements and activities in the Asia-Pacific region. It seems that this new Quad initiative is another scheme to keep an eye on China, to a certain extent, I think, to isolate China and reverse and counters China's aspirational initiative to expand consensus on regional cooperation with the Pacific Islands nations. The IPMDA, it seems for me, the way I, to some extent, perceive it, is a product of a paranoia of the United States, Australia, alongside other member countries of Quad, in view of the recently concluded bilateral security framework agreement between China and the Solomon Islands, conducted in the light of the request and need of the Solomon Islands to assist the said Pacific country in maintaining social order. Hence, just like the Indo-Pacific Economic Framework, the Indo-Pacific Partnership for Maritime Domain Awareness, obviously, for me, the way I see it, is both inherently political, since both excludes China. It is somewhat a vehicle to advance Quad, or more particularly the United States' security interests in the region. It is another scheme of the United States to strengthen its influence and opaque persuasion over smaller states like the Philippines to take side with the United States as against China. If one looks more closely, IPMDA and even the IPEF, to a considerable extent, have traces of Cold War mentality and framework, since it deliberately excludes China and pretty much other countries that the United States considers as non-liberal democracies or so-called non-like-minded countries. Just to note, the Indo-Pacific Partnership for Maritime Domain Awareness has predominantly been defined by the United States in the same manner that the US President Joe Biden has championed the Indo-Pacific Economic Framework. Furthermore, the Indo-Pacific Partnership for Maritime Awareness is not only an attempt to isolate China, but an attempt to paint China as the so-called enemy. This is quite a rabble-rousing and suggestive action on the part of the Quad, which gives rise to the possibility and real concern among ASEAN countries like the Philippines, and even being caught in between and pressured to take sides between China and the US, that goes against the idea of an ASEAN region that is a zone of peace and a zone of freedom and neutrality. Take note that from the very onset of the US pivot to Asia strategy, many, if not all, ASEAN countries refuse and try to avoid taking a side between the US and China and would rather pursue and strive for a more balance between the two countries' strategic alignments and economic interests. Thus, in essence, most ASEAN countries, if not all, prefer not to choose between the United States and China as much as possible. Implications-wise, thus regarding what are the possible implications of the IPMDA, it will likely escalate tension, I hope not, between Quad and Quad members in China. This again is another irritant to the already deteriorating US-China relations. It also risks fermenting divisions among Asian countries. Likewise, an initiative like IPMDA may result in China, probably, exerting greater efforts to enhance and ramp up its defense and security deterrence capabilities. Other countries in the region may also be provoked to do the same. Such a scenario would in many ways endanger the peace and stability of Southeast Asia and the broader Asia-Pacific or Indo-Pacific region. To conclude, the rivalry and competition of superpowers, particularly between China and the US, are one of the major geopolitical concerns of small countries like the Philippines. Though it is somewhat a wishful thinking at the moment, how I wish that the US could find a compromise to coexist peacefully and cooperatively with China. With the raging Ukraine crisis and the ever-present and still prevalent COVID-19 pandemic, the need for economies in the Asia-Pacific region like the Philippines to bounce back from the devastation triggered by the pandemic and the Ukraine crisis is primordial. It should take precedence or should be the priority, and that would connote that countries in the Asia-Pacific region like the Philippines do not need an Indo-Pacific Partnership for Maritime Domain awareness that targets or isolate China, which would further accelerate the growing rivalry, competition, and the Cold War atmosphere between China and the US in the Asia-Pacific region and even beyond, which make the regional context and realities all the more volatile and precarious. To note, a Cold War between the two superpowers will only lead to the progression of conflicts in the world at a time when cooperation is indispensable and vital to regional and global survival, stability, peace, because of the continuous prevalence of the COVID-19 pandemic and the ramification of the ongoing Ukraine crisis. Rather, countries in the Asia-Pacific must emphasize common interests, strike a middle ground amid conflicting interests, and seek greater value in win-win cooperation in maritime affairs, regional connectivity, pandemic response, economic trade cooperation, mitigating climate change and the energy crisis affecting the countries in the region and the world at large. Countries in Asia-Pacific region must do away with unilateralism and the creation of blocs or grouping with the sole purpose of singling out one country. Instead, they must work together to promote peace, stability, prosperity in Asia and the world in general. Most importantly, countries in the Asia-Pacific region must be cognizant of the fact that China is here to stay, precisely because it is part and parcel of the Asia-Pacific region by virtue of its geography. More than anything, China is a strong regional power in every sense. Thus, no one in the Asia-Pacific region can and should exclude China. It is like the giant elephant in the room, so to speak. Thus, China participation in the Asia-Pacific affairs is essential. This is a fact that all countries, including the US, have to accept. This applies to all regional and international affairs, including the IPMDA. Hence, in Quad's attempt to promote maritime domain awareness and reduce illegal, unreported, unregulated fishing in the Indo-Pacific region, it should involve China in the conversation precisely because China has substantial maritime presence in the Asia-Pacific region, which makes it a key, if not the most critical and vital player in combating illegal, unregulated, and unreported fishing activities in the region. Most importantly, countries in the Asia-Pacific region should forge and institutionalize multilateral, bilateral arrangement and agreements with China and other Asian countries on matters related to fishery management, environmental cooperation, joint oil and gas development, and exploration and joint maritime patrols, among others, which are important economic issues and maritime activities that will boost the mutual and confidence between and among Asian countries, and that includes China. All this will to a greater extent serve as a win-win compromise that will benefit Asian countries in general and may trigger the resolution of dispute and differences among countries in the Asia-Pacific region that have a dispute over land or maritime territories and boundaries. All this by far are the most pragmatic and viable avenues to easing tensions, disputes, and differences among and between countries in the Asia-Pacific region. Building consensus probably may prove difficult, but not impossible, while confrontation on issues surrounding the Asia-Pacific region certainly is self-defeating. Thus, the IPMDA should be taken with a grain of salt and a second thought. Ladies and gentlemen, friends and colleagues, thank you for your attention and good afternoon.
Thank you, Anna, for your presentation about IPMDA. You explained from another perspective, especially from the big power rivalry, to explain why US just put forward this initiative, especially the rebalance of Asia-Pacific region and also the pursuit of sole dominance of the area of US. So, and also thank you for your suggestion for the win-win compromising. Our next speaker is Captain Martin Sebstein. He is the former senior fellow and head of the Center for Maritime Security and Diplomacy at the Maritime Institute of Malaysia, MIMA. Thank you. It's your floor.
Thank you, sir. Let me just click on this PowerPoint. Are you all able to see this? Let me know if you all are able to see this, please. Hello?
Can't see the slides yet.
Can you see the slides?
No.
No, not yet.
No, no more?
Not yet, yeah.
I can see from my own PDF file. PPT file.
Can someone open from the other side? Because I've uploaded here, I can open it here, but I don't think you guys can see it. Possible to open it from there?
I think you can proceed. Then I will ask my assistant to open it and share in the screen.
Oh, great. Thanks. Good afternoon from Kuala Lumpur, and thank you for inviting me to speak in this august group of scholars and personalities. And hello again to friends that I'm meeting again after such a long time. I'm Captain Martin, and I used to be the center head and senior fellow at a maritime think tank in Malaysia called Maritime Institute of Malaysia. And right now I'm a consultant, freelance consultant. Before I go on to explain my slides, just 12 of them, I'd like to talk about the joint statement itself by the Quad leaders. Yes, next slide, please. So if we look at the joint statement itself, you can see that MDA, back. MDA is actually the last point out of all the points that they spoke about. MDA is the last one. So they have peace and stability, where they talk about China and this and that. They talk about critical emerging technology, Quad fellowship. MDA was the last item that they spoke about. Okay, next slide, please. And within the MEA rubric, there was HADR, humanitarian assistance, disaster relief, combating illegal fishing, and regional fusion centers. I just want to bring this to perspective for I provide the Malaysian perspective from the way I look at it. Indo-Pacific somehow skips ASEAN. ASEAN is not part of this discussion. Indo-Pacific, big power competition, but this is what is more important in ASEAN. Next slide, please. So what we see in Malaysia is more the fisheries part. You can see how much we lose a year on fisheries and why it is important for us to have MDA. And looking at the rise of cost of living, we find that fisheries would have been a better area that we can be part of if there is an MDA effort in South China Sea. Next slide, please. So if we go to fisheries, then we are looking at everything around the fishery issue: food security, human security, resource security, and of course, revenue security. When you lose fisheries from your maritime estate, you also lose revenue, not just the resource. And if more and more fish is lost, then you have less and less fishermen. And these fishermen will start going into smuggling and trafficking and all the other crimes, because we have taken out fisheries from their centuries-old profession. So it is also a part of human security. Next slide, please. So when we look at fishing vessels, these are the array of fishing vessels. We need MDA to actually analyze the algorithms of context so that we can identify which type of vessel that we are dealing with, where are they, how frequent that they are in that area. And all this requires technology. And technology is where we look for from MDA. Next slide, please. So here are the threats to fisheries, two fisheries. We're talking about transshipment, which means someone else is coming into your waters and buying the fish from your fishermen. Someone else is coming inside and doing all kinds of stuff. Fish, narcotics coming through fishing vessels, human trafficking, drug smuggling, arms smuggling. For all this, you need MDA. And what is the answer to this? Next slide, please. The solution is the fourth industrial revolution. The industrial revolution has provided us with emerging technology. And now you can see hidden vessels that is already we can already light up the hidden vessels, which means if the vessel is switching off their AIS or VMS, we have other technologies that can actually light up darkened vessels. Next slide, please. So here it is. We are talking about AIS and VMS, but we also can track through emerging technologies, radio frequency, views, radar, pulse repetition frequency. And then we realize that there's so much of technology available that we can light up darkened vessels. So what will this enhancement in operations provide us? Next slide, please. So with this, we will be able to obtain maritime forensics and enhance our operation. If this vessel analysis can provide efficient patrolling, it can provide high readiness of vessels, which means patrol vessels don't have to go round and round in circles. They go exactly to the hotspots where these vessels have been targeted. So now we have high readiness of vessels. Of course, it reduces costs. It provides an array of ability. I believe that MDA can provide this for a small country like Malaysia, having 4 maritime estates: Strait of Malacca, the east coast of the peninsula, west coast of Sabah, and also the Sulu Sulawesi. This type of MDA is required to identify and manage what we don't know. Right now, we don't know what we don't know. At least MDA can help us to know what we don't know. So I look at that part. Next slide, please. So when you look at MDA for fisheries, of course, I don't want to talk about HADR because we already have the AHA Center. I don't want to talk about regional fusion centers because we have so many information sharing centers doing capacity building and all that. But they are talking about Indo-Pacific. I'm more interested in what MDA can be required or can be used in ASEAN. With that, I end my presentation. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you, Martin, for your presentation about the fishery and how to conduct the enforcement of operation. Thank you. Our next speaker is Mr. Win Man Dong. He is the Deputy Director General of the East Sea Institute of Diplomatic Academy of Vietnam. It's your turn.
Well, good afternoon, everybody. At the outset, I'd like to thank the Global Governance Institution to organize this interesting forum. And like other presenters, I'd like to share my viewpoints on the Quad's latest maritime initiative, its implication for maritime security architecture, and make some recommendations for the region from a member of ASEAN. Well, you know, the Quad is more than just maritime security. It's also about healthcare, vaccine supply chains, but its latest initiative is about maritime security cooperation. So over the years, the Quad has been, step by step institutionalized. So the Quad's latest maritime initiative, as you have already known about, aspire to become a pillar of the regional maritime architecture. However, there are competing visions of the maritime security architecture, notably ASEAN vis-a-vis the Quad, but also other multilateral and bilateral arrangements. But the latest developments show that the Quad is emerging as a very competitive pillar. So I believe that the Quad's latest development can have some implications for the maritime security architecture. Now, if regional security is centered only upon the Quad, there would be a minus for multilateralism and the role of smaller powers like ASEAN countries. The Quad is not really inclusive nor comprehensive. We need a security architecture that takes on the interests of all stakeholders and cooperate on a wide range of issues of common concerns. I think that an exclusive club may cause unease and anxiety in the wider region, and the Quad needs to contribute to regional confidence building or preventive diplomacy. If a security arrangement focuses too much on security-related matters, I think it may lead to regional tensions if not managed properly. So any security arrangement needs to take upon the interests of all stakeholders with responsibility to regional peace and security, respect for international law in these operations. And above all, it should contribute to regional confidence building. So let me focus on the convening role of ASEAN as a pillar for maritime security architecture as an alternative to Quad. I believe that ASEAN is true multilateralism. The Quad is not really fit to play the role of an overarching security architecture in the region. Instead, the Quad needs to support the central role of ASEAN. Well, maintaining good order at sea is critical in the ASEAN's outlook on the Indo-Pacific. The AOIP, in this region, we call it the AOIP. This is also congruent to the views and interests of all ASEAN external partners, including China and all Quad member countries. Actually, the maritime architecture has been existing in the region for about 2 decades. It's not really about the Quad, but since the emergence of ASEAN involving all the 10 countries. Over the years, the plans, frameworks, and institutions for maritime cooperation has been evolving. And ASEAN has created the ASEAN Maritime Forum and the extended ASEAN Maritime Forum to coordinate on maritime cooperation activities. There are some fundamental principles that can serve as cooperating guidelines. So there are existing international and regional instruments that ASEAN and its external partners has been subscribing to. For example, the United Nations Charter, the international conventions and regional treaties, particularly the 1982 UNCLOS, the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea, and more recent documents such as the AOIP, as just mentioned, and the East Asian Summit Statement on Enhancing Maritime Cooperation, etc. Well, thankfully, all of ASEAN's dialogue partners, including all Quad members, have expressed continued support for ASEAN centrality in the regional architecture. I think that the maritime architecture should promote existing and explore new areas of cooperation, such as blue economy, preservation of the marine environment, maritime security and safety, freedom of navigation over flight, and also address non-traditional securities at sea. So these are some of my thoughts on the latest development of the Quad and its implication on the regional architecture. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Yuan, for your presentation. You mentioned about your general comments on the IPMDA. You just impressed me that you mentioned that if it's not handled properly, it might cause some tension, right?
Correct.
So, and also you mentioned that the ASEAN centrality. So that should just, that principle should be upheld even in conjunction with the Quad environment in the region.
That's correct. Yeah.
Yeah.
ASEAN centrality is a principle that needs to be upheld, and that is good for every country in this region.
Okay, thank you for your presentation. Our next speaker is Dr. Shafi Mubali. Dr. Shafi.
Yes, hi.
Mukibat. Sorry for that.
So it's okay, it's fine. Thank you so much. A very good afternoon to everyone. Thank you so much for the invitation to join this webinar today. I really enjoyed the remarks from the other speakers on this issue. And I'd like to begin by, briefly discussing that, basically, I think we all agree that information sharing and maritime domain awareness are at the heart of contemporary maritime security agenda. And previous speakers have mentioned that MDA is about having comprehensive position and intentions of all actors at sea in the given area of interest. And this activity, in general, requires compilation, correlation, and fusion of surveillance data collected from different diverse sources, satellites, radar, and so on. And basically in Southeast Asia, promoting MDA has become an increasingly high priority for many Southeast Asian states. You can see, the current condition in Southeast Asia, the rise of regional maritime quote-unquote disorder, combined with the growing awareness that these challenges can be dealt with through a whole of government approach, has prompted several countries to create multi-agency operational fusion centers to mitigate these dangers that has been discussed. So far, there are at least 3 major centers that are at the backbone of the regional MDA structure in Southeast Asia. And although far from perfect, this regional system has also been used as a model of organizing MDA in other parts of the world. Now we come to our main discussion today, which is the Indo-Pacific maritime domain awareness. I mean, we've discussed this a lot, and referring to the fact sheet of the Quad Leaders Tokyo Summit just now, the IPMDA initiative, they say that it's aimed at delivering on the goals of enhancing maritime security and shared domain awareness in the region via technology and training support. To quote some more from the document, it says that in close consultations with regional partners, IPMDA will offer a near real-time integrated and cost-effective maritime domain awareness picture. This initiative will transform the ability of partners, they mentioned in the Pacific Islands, in Southeast Asia, and in the Indian Ocean region. So these are some of the things that are included in the documents and some of the things that we already know from what is described as IPMDA. I think as this is a new initiative, it's still very difficult to predict the outcome and how it's going to go. It may take some time to see any result or impact if indeed it is implemented quickly. So I think it is, for me, it's difficult to answer some of the questions raised by this webinar. There are still very limited details given, other than those that are published after the Tokyo Summit, which was on the 24th of May. That is, again, only 1.5 months ago. So all we can do now is basically loosely predict, without knowing further details, we can loosely predict what is going to come after the initiation of this IPMDA. So I think instead of predicting the impacts and how the initiative will be implemented, I'd like to use these short remarks to discuss some points of view from Southeast Asia in general and Indonesia in particular, mostly about how we view the Quad, because this is, I think, how Southeast Asia views the Quad will be translated into how they also view initiatives by the Quad, such as the IPMDA. In Southeast Asia, Southeast Asian countries continue, I think, to have mixed feelings about the Quad. Perceptions vary by country, but I think most of ASEAN nations remain, well, a little bit wary with the Quad and its activities, because generally we see it as a challenge to ASEAN centrality. The notion that ASEAN provides the central platform within which regional institutions are anchored. Simply put, I think the Quad and the Quad's revival, to be exact, has triggered worries about where ASEAN fits into the evolving regional architecture. A survey conducted by ICS in 2019 examined this basically, and found that specifically for Indonesia, about 68% of Indonesian respondents are skeptical towards the Quad. However, it is interesting to see that there is a slight different vote while talking about the Indonesia's participation in security initiatives and military exercises organized by Quad countries. So to the Quad itself, there are skepticism, but Indonesians in general view positively security initiatives and military exercises in bilateral relations with Quad member countries. With about 50% of Indonesian respondents saying that they should continue to take part in this different security and military activities, showing that Indonesians still recognize that its military capabilities are still very much relating to the US and its allies. And I think this needs to be underlined to emphasize some of the perceptions towards different bilateral issues and towards the Quad. The latest 2022 survey, again by ICS, suggests that there is an increased receptivity to the Quad, meaning that in 2019 there was still confusion about what the Quad is. And after 3 years, there is now increased receptivity towards the Quad, and showing significant warming towards the grouping, with around 58% agreeing that strengthening the Quad and tangible cooperation in areas such as vaccine security and climate change is positive and reassuring. I think this can be translated that not knowing details and not knowing what something is really contributes to skepticism towards something. And I think this is something that should also be understood with regards to IPMDA, not understanding what it is, not knowing what impacts it will bring. At the moment, there is high skepticism and concerns towards new initiatives like IPMDA. And again, seeing from a traditional view of ASEAN, I think it's worth noting that Indonesia's skepticism towards the Quad, again, may be seen as hesitant to the Quad's challenge towards ASEAN relevance in maintaining regional stability. Again, ASEAN is still the #1 vehicle for Indonesia and its foreign policy, and therefore any concerns towards challenges for ASEAN is seen as a concern for Indonesia. So it can be said that skeptics not only gives Indonesia a certain degree of awareness, but also reconfigure the ASEAN's institutional strategy in retaining Southeast Asia from great power politics projection. So with this, understanding how Indonesia particular and Southeast Asia in general in viewing the Quad and the Quad initiatives like IPMDA, I'd like to basically end with two main points as my key takeaway from this, from my own observation of this discussion. Number one is that for IPMDA to succeed, a strategic support from Southeast Asia is essential. So far, again, without knowing any much details, we do not know for certain to what extent Southeast Asian countries would be involved. As long as we don't know this, as long as there is no clear explanation about how Southeast Asian countries would be involved, you can expect that Southeast Asian countries would continue to be skeptical about this, the same way that we were very highly skeptical about the Quad a few years ago. And you can see that after further explanation, more and more reception towards a certain idea can be found. The second point, my key takeaway is that in the long run, basically, I think ASEAN member states would tune their take on the Quad and its initiatives, including IPMDA, based on how these initiatives would contribute to the overall regional dynamics. In this regard, of course, the great power rivalry, the US-China competition. If we see Quad and its initiatives as contributing negatively towards regional stability and security, of course, we would continue to be skeptical and not offering support to it. But if we see, but this is not limited to only Quad. If we see any initiatives, be it coming from the US, be it coming from China, be it coming from Japan, other names, it could be Quad, it could be AUKUS, it could be anything. If we see this as initiatives that contribute negatively to regional security and regional dynamics, then we would continue to be very skeptical and not offering support. So I think these are the two main points that I can sum up from my observation in how Southeast Asia view Quad and how Southeast Asia view initiatives by Quad such as the IPMDA. I'll end my remarks here. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Doctor. Thank you for presentation about the Indonesia in particular and the Southeast Asia in general, the attitude toward Quad, and also your future prediction about IPMDA. I just have one question, just to clarify. You mentioned that not details knowing or reading about how the MDA will be implemented. But according to the report that Biden administration will soon consult with the regional governments. Any progress about that?
Not yet, at least not from an Indonesian standpoint. So we don't see any progress yet in terms of the information that we receive on this issue. And basically, it is something that is not very much discussed in Indonesia yet. So regarding Indo-Pacific, what is currently being highly discussed in Indonesia is actually the Indo-Pacific economic framework. That is taking a lot of attention from the Indonesian general public, but IPMDA not so much. So it's basically because we don't know what it is. We don't understand what the implications are. And I think that's my emphasis here, that as long as we don't know much about it, there will remain to be skepticism.
Okay, thank you, thank you. Okay, our next speaker is Mr. Rohit Kaki. He is the Senior Project Officer of Asia Pacific Unit.
Senior Colonel, he failed to sign in because he's in the mountain area.
Okay. Okay, so we skip that. So our speaker now is Mr. Andrew Chap. He is a British Academy postdoctoral fellow. It's your turn. Thank you.
Thank you, Colonel Wang, and also to Captain Tien for the invitation, and to my fellow panelists for their really thought-provoking presentations so far. Also, vote of appreciation to CD and Sophie and everybody behind the scenes for putting this really interesting event together. I think it's very important to be talking about these types of developments, and this is a really great platform for that. So overall, I think maritime domain awareness is quite clearly increasing as a general trend, just general human awareness of the maritime space. And this has actually been key to the PRC's advantages in recent years as it's advanced its strategic control in the South China Sea dispute. Just look at the importance of the China Marine Surveillance Fleet as they emerged in the mid-2000s to China's later efforts. Everything really depended on knowing something about what was going on in the maritime domain. And then later, we saw China Coast Guard regularizing the deployments there. And they've, I think, yeah, really been a kind of foundation for the expansion of China's strategic control that we've seen in the last few years. So maritime domain awareness is not anathema to China, I think, from my perspective. I think with this IPMDA, the Quad is probably trying to find a way to make itself useful in the region. It's probably trying to draw on its particular strengths in this area of maritime domain awareness, as well as its a reputation for being a grouping that's set up to counter China's strategic advances, in order to offer something that to the region in terms of maritime domain awareness. The Quad obviously faces major disadvantages in the strategic competition in the region, the overall strategic competition, because its economic offer can't really compete with the PRC's economic offer at this point in time. So that's where I see the IPMDA coming from, and where it goes to, as the other panelists have alluded to, is really quite open-ended and something to watch. However, I don't think maritime domain awareness in the region is all about the US, or even about the US and China, or even about the Quad. Professor Sakabe Mori has already alluded to the Japanese Coast Guard's extensive existing maritime MDA initiatives, and I'm going to argue that Europe is also a significant factor as well that we haven't discussed yet. And when I say Europe, I'm referring to both the EU and the UK, now that it's outside, that has left the EU. I think the evidence that Europe and the UK are taking an increasing interest in this area is quite substantial. We've seen strategic documents from firstly from several EU member states, Germany and the Netherlands, released these Indo-Pacific strategy documents. And then somewhat unexpectedly last year, the European Union itself released 2 Indo-Pacific strategy documents, including some interesting language about maintaining a meaningful naval presence. So on the one hand, it's got that naval element, but in contrast, in quite a sharp contrast to the United States Indo-Pacific strategy, the EU's strategy had a very heavy emphasis on cooperation. In fact, the title of the documents was the EU Strategy for Cooperation in the Indo-Pacific. It had a heavy emphasis on economics, EU relations with regional powers, which include China, as well as global governance, and especially ASEAN, to go to Professor Nguyen's and Professor Muibat's points about the need to maintain ASEAN centrality. It seems that the EU is acutely aware of that and actually sees ASEAN as central to its own Indo-Pacific strategy. Most relevantly to the discussion here, the Indo-Pacific strategies of the European Union highlighted an expansion of the EU's existing maritime domain awareness project. It's called the Critical Maritime Route Wider Indian Ocean, or CRIMARIO project. It's primarily about capacity building, training, information sharing, incident reporting, interagency coordination, these types of things. And the strategy documents that we saw last year flagged an expansion of this CRIMARIO maritime domain awareness project from the Indian Ocean, where it was already happening, into Southeast Asia and the South Pacific. So I think this is quite significant, because it's a major expansion in the area in which the EU is working on these maritime domain awareness projects. And also to Jojo's point about complementarity and inclusivity, the EU's Indo-Pacific strategies have had that heavy emphasis on global governance and multilateralism that suggests that this type of initiative wouldn't necessarily be exclusive of China, and particularly the global governance issues around IUU fishing, maritime commons and the like. The EU would show a strong recognition of the necessity of involving China in those processes of trying to combat the major multilateral challenges. The strategy also went on to say that the EU wants to cooperate with partner navies, I'm quoting here, cooperate with partner navies and build their capacities where relevant to establish comprehensive monitoring of maritime security and freedom of navigation. So with the last bit of language there, freedom of navigation, it's obviously trying to emphasize this openness and cooperativeness, but it's also linking into the EU's strong support for the UNCLOS regime, the UN Convention on the Law of the Sea regime, and that really does put the EU against China in light of the 2016 arbitral ruling. This has been backed up by some naval deployments as well, some of which were already happening. France has maintained a relatively strong naval presence in the Indo-Pacific since around 2014 or maybe even before. The UK Navy has been showing up at different times, particularly since 2018, sent the aircraft carrier to the region in 2021, and Germany did its first transit through the South China Sea, the 9-dash line area that marks China's ambiguous claims, first transition through that area since 2002. So this talk that the EU is putting out there about its ambitions to be a strategic player in the region do have some kind of substantial backing. Now, a little bit, if I have time, about the reasons. Can I just check how much time I've got left?
Yeah. Already finished.
Could I just check how much time do I have left?
You have just additional two minutes.
2 minutes, okay. So just a quick word about the reasons for the Europe's increasing engagement with the Indo-Pacific. I think, number one, it's been sparked by Trump. So the geopolitical tensions that have arisen as a result of Trump's trade war, as well as the evident sort of uncertainties around the US's conduct, the unreliability of the US as an ally, and the heavy military emphasis on the US's in the US's own strategizing. I think all of these have fed towards an EU desire to offer a more normative alternative that's based around global governance and competition and sort of healthy economic competition, as well as that strong support for the maritime rules-based order as expressed in the UNCLOS. I think secondly, it's of course about the rise of China. It's about China's capabilities to potentially threaten trade routes. Now, we can argue over whether this is a valid fear or not, but it's quite clearly there in the EU strategy documents. And I think it's quite striking that the strategy documents, which seem designed to contrast with the US's position on many of these regional issues, actually explicitly talk about a concern for the EU's commercial shipping routes. So if China is not a threat to commercial trade routes, this is evidence that it has been unable to persuade the EU of that on a strategic level. And the EU has also obviously been concerned, as I mentioned, about the flouting of the international maritime law as expressed in the UNCLOS, very important to Europe in particular, as well as the UK. And then a third factor, I think, in the EU's Indo-Pacific strategy has been the rise of the Indo-Pacific concept itself. It's an example of where the concept basically leads to strategic action, because Europe was already present in the Indian Ocean, but then when the Indian Ocean becomes part of the Indo-Pacific, it draws the European strategic focus eastwards. And I think that's what's happened. That's what we see in these developments that I've been talking about, the strategic documents and the maritime domain, the expansion of the maritime domain awareness project. So with that, I'll leave it there, and hopefully we've still got some time for questions.
Okay, thank you, Andrew, for your presentation, introducing EU's attitude toward Asia Pacific, especially EU's increasing attention to the areas, and also the expansion of EU in terms of maritime security and maritime domain awareness capability building. Thanks for that. Our final speaker is Dr. Yan Yan. Dr. Yan Yan, she is the director of the Research Center of Ocean Law and Policy in the National Institute for South China Sea Studies. Now, Dr. Yan Yan, it's your floor.
Thank you, Chair. Since I have only 4 minutes left, so I try to focus and straight to my points. Well, basically today I have 3 points. And first of all, I would like to talk a little bit about why I think the IPMDA initiated by the Quad is a security challenge to China. And second, my point is whether the IPMDA will provide a chance for the US Coast Guard for another excuse or platform to enter the South China Sea. And my third thinking is what the South China Sea regional countries, us and Southeast Asian countries, China, can respond to this IPMDA. Well, these are my 3 points that I wanted to talk about. So first of all, I do agree with many of the speakers previously already said that the MDA itself is not a thing targeted at China. Well, I do think so, because I think this the MDA, Maritime Domain Awareness, is the reaction of countries after the 9/11 to combat this security threat by this, it is actually an inclusive interest for us. And also when the maritime domain awareness in the sea is actually for combat maritime net crimes like privacy, piracy, and illegal combat fishing, etc., etc. It's actually for public good. But I do think that the IPMDA, Indo-Pacific MDA, initiated by the Quad, is actually has a very clear targeted at China. And I think it's the Biden administration's new tool of implementing the new Indo-Pacific strategy. I think the biggest security challenge is that this IPMDA does not only can track China's fishing vessels in the ocean, but also it can track, monitor, and deter the deployment and activities of China's underwater and surface vessels, warplanes, all types, and also the Coast Guard vessels, etc., etc. Not just within the Quad, but also within countries who participated in this IPMDA. So I think that it has far-reaching maritime security implications because it aims to provide near real-time information from multiple sensors on naval vessel activities. And also I read some one US official opinion on the internet saying that the military of the Quad will be able to share this data for coalition planning. So I think that's why I think it's a security threat to China. And second, I do have a little concern that of the US Coast Guard entering into China and have more presence in the region after the IPMDA, because it is an initiative targeted at the so-called Chinese illegal fishing in the whole world. So I think that we all know that since the year 2019, the US has been trying to counter the so-called China's gray zone tactic by sending its Coast Guard vessels to operate in the South China Sea. And it's already happening, and also it has been planning to deploy more Coast Guard vessels to the South China Sea region and be permanently stationed here from next year. So I'm thinking that maybe using this illegal fishing comeback mechanism could be another excuse for the US to send more Coast Guard vessels to the region and disturbing the waters in the South China Sea. And third, what can we expect from the South China Sea neighboring countries, including China and our ASEAN friends? I do with the previous speaker, Andrew, says that the MDA is not about US and China. And I do aware that there are already many of these information sharing cooperation between China and ASEAN countries, between China and Japan, etc., etc. Well, in the region, in the South China Sea region, we have the RECAP, we have the IFC, International Fusion Center, which are all based in Singapore. So we do have some initiatives and the information sharing platforms that we already have. So I think the key question to many of China's neighbors, the South China Sea regional states, is to what or whom is the IPMDA cooperation for or against, and why? So I think it is not of it's of my country's national interest to you need to consider whether to participate to this initiative. You have to think about whether it will provoke China. I think this is the thing that's in my mind. So my suggestion or my thinking is that for the South China Sea regional states, we can in order to share information for combat maritime crimes, for inclusive maritime interests, and for this common interest, we better stick to the information sharing platform that we already have, most of them based in Singapore, and also under this 2002 Declaration on the Conduct of Parties, the DOC, we do have many areas to explore to continue our maritime cooperation. And that's what I'm thinking in my mind. So to save some time for discussion, I will stop here. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Yan Yan, for your presentation. Thank you. Now, let's begin our moderated discussion. So first, is any panelist willing to comment on others' presentation, or you can simply just renew or add some new points to whatever you have already contributed. Thank you.
I have a question, Colonel Wang.
Okay, please.
For my fellow panelists from Southeast Asia in particular, what would be the response to the EU initiatives that I was mentioning? What's the risk of duplication? As Dr. Yan's already mentioned there, and other panelists too, the existing maritime domain awareness projects in the region are quite significant, and so is the EU joining this this type of game that's already out there in the region? Is that going to be welcome, or is it going to be seen as the EU trying to, as I said before about the Quad, make itself useful?
Andrew, if I can answer the question, Captain Martin, I was part of Crimario 1 when it started, and I attended the closing ceremony in Kenya, Mombasa, when they launched Crimario 2. I find that when it comes to domain awareness, many security agencies want to play the role of the mall cop. You know, why I say mall cop is looking at the screen and seeing everything like a cop on the mall, but not realizing what they're watching. But everybody want to have that feel good of everything they can see. I'm more interested in analysis of what you have. It could be a historical data, but at least you have an analysis. And I don't find analysts in the law enforcement agency or the military when it comes to MDA. Either they don't understand the algorithms of the movement of vessels, or they are too focused on becoming, on seeing CCTVs, and they feel that if they can see everything, everything is fine. The issue we have here is an analysis of vessels, of what they are doing and where they are operating, and when they come out, and trying to look for anomalies in the analysis. And that's what I do not see. If EU wants to start off the Crimario 2 project, this would be a better avenue for Crimario to come in and talk about vessel analysis. And this has gone up to the Ocean Conference. They're also looking at Dakan vessels, lighting up Dakan vessels as much as I mentioned just now, that is more important than actually having a live feed and having a satellite there continuous. And when you talk about fisheries, you also require this catch documentation scheme, which is coming from analysis. You see? So it is required. Analysis is required, but unfortunately, I do not see analysts when it comes to MDA. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
For Andrew's question, well, just now I checked the IFC's website. I do notice that they're expanding their partners and yes, partners and agencies that they're working with. And I do see that Norwegian Hull Club is now already a partner of the IFC. So I think basically if it is for navigational safety, if you're willing to share the information of your ships, I think that this kind of IFC or Information Sharing Center will be happy to see the future cooperation.
Okay.
Thank you.
Just to respond to the question in general, no. Good afternoon again to everyone. No? For me, the way I see it, I think any maritime domain awareness initiative, may it be from the public good in the region, in the Asia-Pacific region, and it's supposedly it should be inclusive in a sense that it does not, to a certain extent, exclude any country or single out any country for that matter. I think that's okay. I think it will be very palatable to countries in the region and even to Southeast Asia, because you know it does not create any kind of suspicion or anything to that effect. So I think that's my response. No, the problem only with the initiative of Quad with regard to IPMDA is, you know, it's not as if it's something very suspicious in some ways, because it does not include one country which is very big in the region, which is, you know, it makes other countries, like for example my country, a little bit more not so comfortable about these things. And we know, and it's really a fact, that there's such a thing as competition and rivalry between the United States and China. And we know for a fact as well that the Quad is being led by the United States in the same manner that NATO is being led by the United States in the European side. So I think that's my take on the issue, and to answer the question in a general way. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you all.
I have a small comment and questions also for Andrew. My comment is like, actually, when we're talking about illegal fishing, I think the first step is we have to admit it's a very complicated question.
I would agree.
I'm sorry?
I would agree with you. It's a very complicated.
It involves a lot of issues for domestic reasons. It's not very simple. Like we even don't have a very certain data standard for which the fishing ship come from, like belong to which country. It's really so I think probably let's start from the beginning. Let's discuss. Let's send a regulation. Let's send a basic standard from the regional, bilateral or multilateral regional discuss. I think that's very important. Like we bring the things to what real it is. And I also have a question for Andrew. You mentioned like EU showing us EU has a more inclusive idea about maritime cooperation in the region. So how about your UK standard? We know UK have very long history with the region, and it's a part of Five Eyes. Also, it's a part of the AUKUS. So UK standard is more close to the European Union standard or more close to the Quad standard? Thank you.
Answer very briefly. The UK's has not released an Indo-Pacific strategy as such. Last year it released an integrated review of defense, security, aid and development policy, basically a review of its foreign policy stance. And there was no discernible strategy in there. there was no emphasis on cooperation, for example. I mean, there was an emphasis on cooperation, but then there was also sort of strong language about maintaining, naval presence in the region, etc. And I looked through the integrated review actually just before this event and looked for maritime domain awareness, and that wasn't actually featured. So this is probably a space to watch. I was thinking the UK might, as a member of AUKUS, might feel even somewhat left out as not being part of the Quad's new maritime domain awareness initiative. But we'll have to watch and wait and see. All I can say is that the UK's strategy is some way off, I think, being sort of clearly articulated.
Any other comments?
May I?
Yeah, please.
Yeah, thank you for your comments and presentation. It's interesting to me to know about the each country's perspective on IPMDA, and I am very much impressed by the worrisome feeling from Chinese colleagues and ASEAN countries colleagues, because Quad leaders are not providing details about IPMDA, so that the Quad leaders need to clarify how the ASEAN will be involved and why China are not invited in this initiative. So I'm not government. I don't have any government background, but I think it's important to exchange the different view on IPMDA, including the Quad member countries. Unfortunately, today, Japan, as a Japanese representative, I am only one Quad member countries participant. It's unfortunate. You should know about the other Quad member countries' views on IPMDA. So it's unfortunate for me to, I can't see the Australian and the United States and Indian participants to this webinar. It's important to exchange the different view because Japan, I believe that Japan is hoping to mitigate US-China rivalry in this region. And so Japan and the ASEAN country don't want to see any clash of the US-China US-China relationship in this region, especially in the maritime domain. Although Japan has the difficult maritime dispute with China, but it's still manageable. So it's important to invite the United States and Australian and Indian speakers to this webinar. So my question is why they are not here? Thank you.
Any response from other panelists?
Well,
I may say something as well.
Go ahead.
So,
go ahead.
You want to go ahead, Martin? No, I'm just very brief. I don't have an answer to that. I think colleagues from the organizing committee would have a better answer of why. Maybe they were invited and didn't come. But I think I would like to second what Aki was saying, is that clarifications about this initiative, I think it's very important. And if you can hear from the comments from the other speakers, from me as well, the concern is not necessarily about where this initiative come from or who's in it, but more on the concern is about, what it entails, what impact it would bring, meaning that we can't really predict that due to the limit of the information that we have. So, and that's why I said also, if similar initiatives come from any other countries, I think the responses from Southeast Asian countries would be also similar. So, and in a way, at least from speaking from a Southeast Asian perspective, we don't have a problem with the emphasis on MDA. MDA has always been at the heart of maritime security in Southeast Asia, and we support basically anything to complement our effort in this regard. The concerns I think that we have is that because with the limit of details and information, there is our inability to actually predict the implications and the outcome. That's the problem. Sorry, Martin, over to you.
No, I was just, I agreed with you as well. It's just that perhaps the organizers of this discussion would first want to listen from ASEAN before extending to Indian Ocean or Pacific members to provide their comments. But taking this MDA into context with China, we go back to the Declaration of Conduct of Parties 2002. If you look at the 2002 DOC, you will see that there's a paragraph 6 which talks about cooperative measures which ASEAN and China can take on law enforcement and all the other stuff, which has been going on for more than 20 years and so many activity areas. MDA is also part of it. So Southeast Asia is not alien to this word MDA. And I also feel that we shouldn't jump every time the Quad make a statement because they're good at making statements. So, we shouldn't get undue worried about it. We have so many issues within ASEAN that we are already looking at within ASEAN and dialogue partners, and enhancing that would be a better, a more productive deliverable than looking too much at statements coming out from, any external partnerships. That's just my take. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, Professor Arki, unfortunately, you are the only speaker who represents the Quad countries. So I would like to explain a little bit about the agenda setting of this forum. We set up the topic, this forum, not only to listen to perspectives from the Quad countries, but also to ASEAN countries. And there's no priorities between those two group of countries. Unfortunately, as we did secure one India professor who promised to come, but failed to log in just now for whatever reasons. And also, we invited several rounds of US speakers, but failed to secure one, either because of the time differences or because they are at the holiday, because yesterday is Independence Day for many US speakers. They are in the holiday, so they couldn't make it. We did invite some representatives from the US embassy, but because of their position, they couldn't make any comments, although they are maybe they are in the auditor room. So it's just unfortunately that you are the only speaker who represents the Quad countries. But anyway, it's a free debate. Anyone can share their perspectives. We can agree or disagree, but what's important is that we have this kind of a channel to communicate with each other. Thank you anyway.
Thank you. Thank you. Any new questions?
Senior,
So
can we open floor for the auditors? So the auditors, if they have questions, they can put it in the chat box, or you can drag him to allow him to speak.
Yeah, both way. Maybe you can just allow them to speak themselves, right? So if there's not new question, I would like to ask one for our colleagues from Southeast Asia. I read some comment saying that although overall the Southeast Asian nation are very respective about the Quad and about Quad security initiative. So, but for specific initiative, if that favor their national interest, they might have an approach of a plug and play. So what's your comment about that? Such as just plug and play into the initiative of IPMDA, if that in favor of their national interest. Although overall they will not join the Quad comprehensively,
well, can I say a few words regarding the question, although I'm not from Southeast Asian countries, because I think the question is related to my third point, that I think that in the South China Sea region, we do have already cooperations of information sharing to combat maritime threats and crimes in the region. We already have something like that. So I'm thinking that we don't need to join, I mean the regional countries, all of us, we don't necessarily need to join the IPMDA initiated by the Quad, well, actually, because we have such mechanism in the region by ourselves. So I'm not sure whether that is the answer, but maybe my Southeast Asian friends have your different thinking, but that's just my personal thinking.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Yan. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair.
Can I say a few words about this?
Okay, please.
Well, actually, the Vietnamese official standpoint is that any arrangement that need to contribute to the regional peace and stability and respect for international law, that is the official standpoint of the Vietnamese government, as I know. But my own opinion is that the sensitivity of all regional countries should be taken care of by any security arrangement. It should be inclusive. And as I mentioned, that the interest of all the stakeholders should be taken care of. And if it's focused on only the United States and some of its allies, then it needs to handle things very carefully, because one of the consequences is that it can easily lead to tensions or misunderstanding and even arms race. So that is the consequence. That's why I promoting, ASEAN centrality, because one of the principles is that it's inclusivity and comprehensive cooperation. Well, with regard to the IPMDA, it is very new, and I'm not really sure what it is included there. As far as I know, it involved coordination among some of the fusion center in this region, and I haven't known of any fusion center except the one in Singapore, if I'm not mistaken. So I think it's very nascent initiative, and to comment on this one would be too early. The one that we have more information is the EU initiative, the Crimeria. the Crimea, it has been there for the past few years, and the European Union is promoting it to a lot of countries in this region, and also to Vietnam, because the information about Crimea is all over the internet right now. So I think that as to this moment, I haven't known of any decision by the government or any organization in Vietnam that subscribe to these information data. So I think that everything is, very early period right now. And in the case of the IPMDA, that is already a concern. So we are really need to think twice and to act very carefully when we consider, any cooperation. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Just to respond to the question, I think when you talk about I think in terms of ambivalence, no, and in terms of some kind of not so comfortable about discussion that has something to do with Quad, is basically, well, coming from an Asian, Southeast Asian perspective, I guess, is basically it's the fact that it's really like led by a superpower, but we understand from a geopolitical perspective has a rivalry with another great power in the region. So that's I think one of the ambivalence now coming from a small state like the Philippines. But when you talk about a cooperation in terms of maritime cooperation, maritime domain awareness, combating illegal fishing, responding to humanitarian and natural disasters, I think there's no problem with that, as long as there's such a thing as inclusiveness, meaning all possible parties and all possible players are invited and are being talked to and discussed with. So I think that's the basic assumption there. And also when you talk about security architecture especially in the Southeast Asian region, I think earlier one of our colleagues here have stated already that the ASEAN centrality is very much important for Southeast Asian countries. It should be there, and ASEAN countries should be consulted and be involved in whatever security architecture or whatever architecture for that matter that has something to do and will involve Southeast Asia, especially when you talk about the South China Sea, because that's a very, very sensitive area and there are a lot of, it's a disputed area that affects, each country, especially like the Philippines, in many ways. So I think that's much more, relatively the stand of countries like my country, the Philippines. I think any kind of initiative, as long as it is inclusive and does not operate in a framework that you want to isolate or to single out one country, is okay. Now, if it becomes like a framework of which you isolate or single out one country, and there's such a thing as like a mentality or a framework of a Cold War, I think that's the ambivalence that's where the Southeast Asian countries, or even any countries in Asia for that matter, becomes a little bit more uncomfortable. So I think that's something that probably Quad or countries a member of Quad could possibly reflect on and probably consider, especially with regard to this IPMDA, which we don't know really at the moment how it will end up. Right now, we have some information about it to a certain extent. What's the primary purpose of it? Who are the countries initially involved? Who are the countries that it will talk to? As members of Quad said, it would be more, talking to like-minded countries, which at the end of the day, we know who are those countries who are considered to be like-minded. But in any case, I think the conversation when you talk about IPMDA should be open to all possible countries that is part of the Asia-Pacific region. And I think China is very much part of the Asia-Pacific region. So I think that's the point of the discussion here. And I think that's the point of how all of these things will shape up and will, look like in a matter of time. And if this IPMDA will be implemented. As of now, I think it's much more a pronouncement. It's much more a declaration. But in terms of implementation, I think that that has something to be looked forward to, and we need to see what will happen to it. That's my intervention. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. So if there's any new comments or questions, so let me just say some words. In today's discussions, all the panelists provide their insight on the issues of IPMDA from the perspective, various perspectives, enabling us to establish a picture as broad and objective as possible as we can. Through the candid exchange of views, it's productive and also it's very fruitful to get knowledge and to get to know each other's perception on the issue. I hope we can continue our discussion in future. Finally, on behalf of the executive also will go to the audience for their good attention. Now, the webinar is concluded right here. Thanks and bye.
Thank you.
Thank you.